There is no position more inconsistent and more frustrating on a week-to-week basis and hard to gauge than the tight end positions, especially down the board. But today I'm going to give you 10 or so guys that we can target down the boards, and hopefully they can be somewhat consistent for us. Starting off here with the honorable mentions, we have Michael Mayer. Again, breakout season in the second half of it last year for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's just outside my top 20 because the addition of Brock Bowers. I'm interested to see how that dynamic works with Gardner Minshew running the show. Are both of these tight ends going to be fantasy relevant? I guess we got to wait and see. For Jatavion Sanders, the second tight end drafted off the board behind Brock Bowers, but out of Texas, goes to Carolina, and he's the number one tight end in Carolina for Bryce Young. I think he can be the safety blanket for them because let's not forget, this is an offense that lost Hayden Hurst due to health reasons here in this offseason. So Jatavion Sanders walks right into being the tight end one. Interested to see what he can do. Wouldn't be shocked if he moves up my boards. For Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill, both guys deserve to be on this list. Taysom Hill especially because again, he's a jack of all trades. He can do pretty much anything on the football field if you ask him to. He's like that meme with Spice Adams, right? Where quarterback, running back, you guys get what I'm saying. But Juwan Johnson, again, a guy that is a steady, consistent pass catcher from Derek Carr. This is a guy that finished right outside the top 20 last year. So definitely he has an argument to be inside. Again, same thing with Taysom Hill. Cade Otton and Noah Fant, two guys that are solid tight end ones for their team. Noah Fant had explosive weeks down the season. Cade Otton was kind of steady, 8 to 10 fantasy points a game throughout the entire of the year. So again, a couple guys that you could definitely have an argument for. And these are guys that could easily be in this video today. But at number 20, Hunter Henry, a guy that's not necessarily a sexy pick. You're not excited to pick Hunter Henry unless you're a Patriots fan, right? But he was the tight end 19 last year, and that's with missing 4 games on the season. But he was the tight end 12 on a per game basis. So again, keep that in mind, right? That means technically he's a tight end one. But last year, he gave us 4 different outings, 4 different games with 17 plus fantasy points in a game. 2 of those being with 20 plus. So this is a guy that it definitely gives us those boom weeks, to those weeks that if some of our star players are struggling, Hunter Henry could be the guy to pick it up. So this is a team that doesn't have Mike Gesicki anymore. So there's even more opportunities and more targets that have opened up for Hunter Henry in this offense. And to top it off, he has 2 quarterbacks that like to target the tight end position heavy, whether if it's Jacoby Brissett, as we saw last year in Cleveland, or whether if it's, of course, the rookie Drake May out of UNC. Rookie quarterbacks like to target the receiving running backs and the big body tight ends. Regardless of the quarterback, what I'm getting at here is that Hunter Henry, if he stays healthy, can finish probably as high as tight end 12 here in 2024. But I'm going to play it safe with the subpar quarterback play, at least as far as year one. I'm going to have him at number 20. At number 19, Luke Musgrave. This is a guy that appeared in 10 games last season. But before the injury, in those 10 games, he averaged 7 fantasy points a game, with 3 of those games being in double figures. So again, doesn't come off the page crazy, but again, when we're talking about tight ends down the board, we're looking for upside, and that's exactly what Luke Musgrave gives us because he was getting 7 to 8 targets a game. If he can catch 6 to 7 of those, he's going to easily turn into a top 15 tight end in 2024. But again, when he was healthy, he was the clear-cut number 1 tight end on this roster. So even though Tucker Kraft is in the mix, when they were both healthy, Tucker Kraft was the designated backup here in this offense. So again, he's going to be the guy, the red zone target from day number 1 if he can stay healthy. And on top of all of that, again, Jordan Love, second half of the year, he's a lot more comfortable now. He looked like a completely different guy down the stretch. And this is an offense that has a bunch of number 2s. They don't have that clear-cut number 1 guy, especially in the red zone, which again, I think targets, especially in that red zone, will go to Luke Musgrave. Maybe he can be one of those guys that sneakily has 6 to 8 touchdowns here in 2024. At number 18, Darren Waller. And I'll say this, these next 3 tight ends are very interchangeable. So again, view these guys in tiers because depending on the day or the second or the hour, these guys can be flip-flopped each and every way. But Daniel Jones is the quarterback yet again for the New York Giants. And through the 5 games that Daniel Jones and Darren Waller played last year, the first month or so of the season, he and Darren Waller had a great connection. And again, Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback yet again. But in those games, Darren Waller was the tight end 9 in that span. With 2 of the games, he had over 14 plus fantasy points. So he does have those splash weeks, and he does get heavily targeted when Daniel Jones is the quarterback. Now, again, on top of that, Saquon Barkley has left town. So even more targets, even more touches have opened up in this offense for somebody to take. However, again, a lot of those things sound great for Darren Waller. However, there's always some but with him because there's a lot of things that do worry me about Darren Waller and his upside this year. For number one, we have to worry about his health. Can he always stay consistent? Last year, again, he was a little bit more healthy than in recent years, but can he continue to do that? That remains to be seen. They did draft Malik Nabers at number 6 overall, so he's going to be heavily involved from year one. He's their go-to wide receiver from day one. I'm interested to see the connection between him and Daniel Jones. Isaiah Hodgins held it down for him last year. Jalen Hyatt had some splash weeks. And Wan'Dale Robinson. All three of these guys proved their worth, and they proved that they deserve touches and a decent amount of targets here going into this season. So will there be enough targets and enough volume in this offense going around with the inconsistent and poor quarterback play to have Darren Waller be fantasy relevant? That's the biggest question. The talent is there with Darren Waller, but is there going to be enough volume to him that he's going to be fantasy relevant with all these talented young options around him? That remains to be seen. So Darren Waller at number 18. At number 17, Dalton Schultz. He was the tight end 10 last year with missing 3 games, and he comes back to a very similar situation. But there's also a fork in the road. Last year, though, he had 8 games with 10 plus fantasy points, and 2 of those with 20 plus fantasy points. So he was very consistent, but he also gave us some of those splash weeks as well. Again, he gave us that combination of floor and ceiling, but he was the safety blanket for CJ Stroud. And again, a lot of our fantasy teams. My only worry about Dalton Schultz this year is there was no big departures in this offense. There was only big additions to this offense, bringing in guys like Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs, who demand a lot of touches and a lot of targets here, even in just year number 1. So now more than ever, Dalton Schultz's opportunities are going to be limited going forward. So that safe combination of floor and ceiling I talked about, that is now widened. He now has a very big range on a week-to-week basis as far as where he can finish. But ultimately, I think I think he'll be fine. I think if anybody's numbers take a hit, it'll be Tank Dell and Joe Mixon. But again, this is a guy that is just very risky on a week-to-week basis, and Dalton Schultz, but who isn't down the board here at the tight end position. At number 16, Cole Kmet. And just like Dalton Schultz, Kmet is coming back to a very similar situation, but an offense that has kind of seemingly also only taken opportunities away and out of the hands of Cole Kmet with the additions of Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DeAndre Swift. But still, Cole Kmet was the tight end 8 on a per game basis last year, averaging just about 11 to 12 fantasy points a game. The only reason I gave him the edge over Dalton Schultz and maybe even Darren Waller is the fact that Caleb Williams is a year 1 quarterback. And again, I know he's supposed to be Patrick Mahomes from day one in some people's eyes, but he's still a rookie quarterback. It is a completely different game at this level compared to the collegiate level. So history tells us that rookie quarterbacks tend to favor the big body tight ends and the receiving running backs from day one. Cole Kmet fits one of those molds here in the passing game. So maybe Cole Kmet's numbers don't take a dip, and maybe it's the talented outside options that take a dip outside of Cole Kmet. So again, very big range between ceiling and floor, but that's going to be a trend here on today's video. At number 15, it is Chigoziem Okonkwo, the tight end 20 last year. And I'll be honest, this was my biggest miss last year. I thought that this guy was going to be a top 10 tight end last year. So I'm going back to the well, even though it's pretty much already dry. But the biggest thing for me, because last year he had very inconsistent quarterback play, which led to inconsistent targets on a weekly basis. And ultimately, he just couldn't strand together more than 2 great weeks in a row. And it was just very frustrating to roster, let alone play and start in your lineups. To me, this is an offense now that has their quarterback in Will Levis. At least they believe he's the guy going forward. And when Will Levis took over last year from week 8 on, Chigoziem Okonkwo was the tight end 14 from week 8 on throughout the remainder of the season. So again, he was a borderline tight end 1. And even with the additions of Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard to this offense, that's not going to scare me away from grabbing a guy like Chigoziem Okonkwo, because he's going to be the safety blanket in this offense for a guy like Will Levis. And this is a team that last year, when they started targeting him more, this offense opened up a lot more, especially for guys like DeAndre Hopkins as well. Again, Levis is still young. He's still learning the NFL ropes. He's going to be the safety blanket yet again for Will Levis. I like the upside of him. Maybe it's the year that we get the Chigoziem Okonkwo breakout, because again, his name is just too perfect to say, and we love to say his name. Number 14, Dallas Goedert. He was exactly at this mark last year, and that was with missing 3 games and having 2 games with under under 2 fantasy points in single outings. Also, this offense was just not the same in the second half of last season. Now, however, he's in an offense where they've only added to it. They've added to the fire, of course, bringing in Saquon Barkley. But I don't think Saquon Barkley would necessarily take a lot of the receiving workload away from a guy like Dallas Goedert. There's a reason why this team paid A.J. Brown, and there's a reason why this team paid DeVonta Smith and retained Dallas Goedert. There is a reason they have these talented outside options. I don't think Saquon Barkley is going to be much of a receiver this year. Sure, he'll catch a screen pass here and there, but I think the receiving workload will be taken by that big three-headed monster in A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So with that being said, I think Jalen Hurts has a bounce-back year. This team has a chip on their shoulder. There's a great overall offense over there in Philadelphia. So if Dallas Goedert gets the consistent targets on a week-to-week basis, this is a guy that can easily be a tight end 10 like he was 2 years ago. So I like Dallas Goedert. I think he has a safe floor and upside, and ceiling rather. Jake Ferguson at number 13, a division rival here, as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys tight end. He was the tight end 9 last season. And again, similar situation he's coming back to. He was the number 2 option in this offense, and he remains that, especially now with Tony Pollard out the door. It's a big year in Dallas, and a lot of people have a lot to prove. And for this offense, we know CeeDee Lamb is going to get double covered pretty much on every single play because teams will live with Brandin Cooks beating them, but they'll live with Jake Ferguson beating them. And that's exactly why we love Jake Ferguson as fantasy football players. So ideally, Dak Prescott is going to target Jake Ferguson a lot more this year, especially because of the attention that CeeDee Lamb is going to get. So this is a guy that last year was a big red zone threat. I could see that happening yet again, whether if the amount of targets go his way or not. I can see him being the target in the red zone. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if this guy ends up moving up in my list, maybe even into the top 10. But he has the ceiling, and I think he has a very safe floor. So out of anybody in this list, he might have the safest floor just because of last year. We saw exactly how he operated. Same situation this year, but he's only going to get more targets with the departure of Tony Pollard. At number 12, Pat Freiermuth. Down season last year, but, again, he was the tight end 29, and he missed 6 games on the year. But when we take a look back, when we turn back the clock to 2 years ago, when this guy was healthy, he was the tight end 7. He was averaging just about 11 fantasy points a game. And outside of George Pickens in this current day offense, there's no solidified number 2. They got rid of Deontay Johnson. Now the number 2 option becomes, so a clear cut, it's going to be Pat Freiermuth, right, in this offense. And whether if it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, Pat Freiermuth is going to be the go-to guy if it is not George Pickens in the receiving game, especially in the red zone, because Pat Freiermuth is a really big body, really easy guy to target. But again, George Pickens, a lot of attention. Pat Freiermuth, it's only going to open up for him. Similar situations to guys like Dallas Goedert and Jake Ferguson. They're going to face a lot of single coverage in 2024. At number 11, there's always a rookie, and I say that every single episode, at least so far. But Brock Bowers, he was the number 13 overall pick from this last draft, and arguably the best tight end prospect we've ever seen, at least since we've had Kyle Pitts enter the league. But this is a guy that just reminds us all of a guy like George Kittle, right? He's a blocking tight end, but he kind of does it all, where he's a receiving threat, a blocking threat, but also kind of a rushing threat if you give him the ball in space. But there's just not many tight ends that, can take a screen pass to the house. I mentioned that with Jatavian Sanders. I think Brock Bowers has that same potential. There's not many guys you can just give the ball, make something happen, and he takes it to the house, 50 plus yards down the field. Brock Bowers is that special of a talent where he can do that. And in an offense, that does have a fair share of weapons with Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers, Zamir White looking to break out, and also a breakout guy in himself and Michael Mayer. There is a lot of competition, but with Gardner Minshew running the show, this is a guy that is notorious in his entire fantasy career, where if a player balls out consistently, Gardner Minshew is going to get him the ball consistently. So if Michael Mayer can have a couple splash plays, if Brock Bowers can have a couple splash plays early in the season, I like the upside of a guy like Brock Bowers, because we saw last year, Michael Pittman kind of had a breakout year, had a couple splash weeks early on, and Gardner Minshew targeted him heavy throughout the remainder of the season, and he had career highs across the board. So Brock Bowers, I like his upside from day number 1. And again, hopefully Gardner Minshew can just target him enough throughout the entire season. But again, we're banking on the upside with number 11 here in Brock Bowers. But that is going to do it here for the tight end episode. If you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe. We're on the road to 18,000 subscribers. And of course, we can't get there without you guys. But the support has been amazing. And drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think is too high? Who do you think is too low? But until then, stay happy, stay healthy. Get out.